letting him in.
Good morning. We will wait till we have our folks in from the waiting room.
Hi, Sharon.
Hello, Wayne. Long time no see.
Yeah. Did you get my email of a few weeks ago about?
Yeah. Did you get a call from anyone? And that's the weirdest situation I've heard of.
Yes. Well, if you read the Bloomberg story, it's there's at least 5,000 cases of this. They were giving this money out like candy, and I'm wondering whether they tried with my identity to get PUA too.
Let me follow up on that for
Okay.
you. Did you do a story about it by any chance?
Yeah, I wrote a column that's going to run on Sunday. So if we can find out something today, I can include that in it.
Good. Well, sorry you're going through that.
Well, It's pretty much over now, although, they made me file a paper FOIA. And I pointed out to them that federal law requires them to take an electronic version. And if they don't, they're violating federal law and it strips sovereign immunity. Boy, did they change their tune after that.
They don't know who they're messing with.
Well, I know the law. And so does Tom Roeder, our city editor. And Steve Zansberg, our attorney.
Good for you. Well, I think we have a few folks still connecting, but we'll go ahead and get started. This is not our weekly press call. This is our monthly press call as we changed the cadence as we announced due to furloughs and some staffing transitions. So good to see everyone. I'm Cher Havens, Deputy Executive Director and Chief Communications Officer for the Department of Labor and Employment. We also have Ryan Gedney, Senior Economist. And I actually pulled in a few of my colleagues from the UI senior management team to help with today's update as needed. When you're chatting in your questions, if I am not able to answer, I will ask my colleagues just to chat a response into the chat window, and certainly we can open it up for them to expand on anything for you as well. I would ask that you just cite them as department officials or something more generic than their official title, since they don't have the fun that I have of being the official spokesperson. So thanks to my colleagues. So we'll just go ahead and get started. The things that we'll be briefing you on today, we have a lot of info from Ryan, so I want to move through my update fairly quickly. An update on the one-time stimulus payment that was announced several weeks ago, an update on our virtual agent performance, an update on fraud. As many of you likely know, we're nearing the expiration of the CARES Act that will have some impact to Colorado workers and employers, in fact, so we'll update on that. State extended benefits, and then just a quick update on how we are addressing some process improvement opportunities through some third-party vendor support. So with that, the one-time stimulus payment, we sent out a press release on this several weeks ago. This is known as the POLIS stimulus payment. This is not UI funded, nor is it governed by UI eligibility rules. This is a one-time payment of $375 to every eligible claimant. Eligibility means that you received a weekly benefit amount of $500 or less from March 15th to October 24th. Again, this is funded through non-UI funds. This is an emergency fund funded by the governor's office, about $168 million. There are only about 49,000 Coloradans who would not be eligible for this benefit amount. Last week, we completed an outbound call campaign and an email campaign to all of those folks who would be eligible. In addition to that, we've dedicated a section of our call center to address questions related to eligibility. And claimants can actually go online and check their eligibility through the virtual agent. Certainly because we do need to get to claimant inquiries on other non-POLIS stimulus payment issues, we're asking folks not to call our call center or ask for a callback, because there are so many options available to individuals to check their eligibility. This benefit payment will begin going out December 1st. Again, a one-time stimulus payment, not subject to UI rules, about 430,000 eligible claimants. And I'm going to stop there, see if we have any questions. Looks like I haven't left any out. I see no shaking heads from my colleagues, so we'll go ahead and move on to the virtual agent update. So deploying this Google solution, since deploying in July, we've actually had over 17 million queries and 2 million sessions within the virtual agent tool. It is a tool designed to help us address the surge of call volume that was coming into our call center. We continue to expand capacity and address folks who are waiting for a callback through a number of ways. We actually have a special team that was assigned to calling those folks, calling specifically about pending expiration of benefits, which we'll talk about in a minute. They've gotten through those callbacks, and now they are returning to calling back folks who are at the end of the line, if you will. This week, though, we deployed a new solution that we feel will greatly enhance our ability to get more folks into the queue, where we text a reminder to claimants about their upcoming appointment and ask them to actually cancel their appointment if it's no longer needed. We deployed this on Wednesday. That functionality actually resulted in nearly 300 appointments being canceled. And so we were subsequently able to move folks into those openings. We will probably look at another cadence for this, that we are doing a week out reminder that will even add more ability for us to move folks from the back of the line, if you will, to openings. That said, before deploying the solution, we were still seeing over a 30% no-show rate. So that continues to be an issue that we're watching. On the other hand, we are seeing openings to slots continuously. In fact, we just opened up 2,000 slots for callbacks in December. So we are moving through the wait list for callbacks. On the other hand, we understand there's claimant frustration waiting for a callback when you are in need of benefits, and continue to look at all opportunities to improve that system. Let's see, let's move on to a quick update on fraud. So this has been no news to you all. We've been reporting fraud within the PUA program, specifically Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Benefits, allowed through the CARES Act. These are unemployment benefits to gig workers, independent contractors, and self-employed. Because of the lack of wage verification mechanisms available through regular UI, every state UI program has seen a tremendous amount of fraud within the PUA program. And Ryan will speak to the volatility within the PUA numbers when he gets to his update. Just know that we have both internal teams within CDLE and teams with our vendor to look at what is contributing to the surge in PUA claims, and also how can we expand our fraud detection and prevention efforts within that application to better address what seems to be just an incredible prevalence of fraud, again, nationally, not just in Colorado. Consequently, what happens is we've implemented some fraud triggers, as we've reported, over 20 fraud identifiers that would indicate to us this may be a fraudulent claim. It's not a perfect program. In fact, this program does have flaws because of the lack of verification. So it, on one hand, is catching fraud. On the other hand, it might be catching legitimate claims who for some reason are caught up by one or more of the fraud triggers. You all have reported this. We recognize it's an issue. We've asked you to direct folks to call our PUA call center and report a hold. We then take those holds and deploy them to triage teams to have a deeper look into what the hold might be. And again, I don't want to tip our hand into what these identifiers are, but if we see a claim where somebody's over 100, there's a chance that's fraud, as an example. So on one hand, it's an unfortunate circumstance that we can't just pay every claim. If we paid every claim, we could be paying criminals. And so there are some legitimate claims that have been held up in the fraud detection process. That said, we did take a deeper dive into some analysis of the data of single fraud holds and looked at what seemed to be the largest reason for a fraud hold, and have been working through those claims. And so we believe in the next week or so, some of those claimants who've been caught up in those fraud holds will now see their claims released. Again, we cannot lift all 20 plus mechanisms because we have a duty to make sure that those payments are made with integrity and were properly made. So that's our quick update on how we've been progressing with that. Since I know this has been a topic of interest this week, I'm just going to see if there's any questions. Tamara, it's if you're talking about those legitimate claims that are being held up by fraud holds, and by the way, I have a long email to respond to you with all of these questions with today. It's over 5,000 of those that were held up in fraud holds that the teams are working through. And again, those payments will start to be, those claims will start to be released in the next several weeks. So Karen's question is, how long does a typical investigation to fraud might take? And the answer is it depends. We do have a mechanism in place, as you all know, where we've asked for an individual to share with us a selfie with their identification. That is one mechanism where if they're able to upload, our team is able to access that, then we can expedite the review of the claim. Some of these claims are very complicated, again, without getting into what the fraud triggers are. And some of them that you all have sent to us are actually under investigation for criminal activity. So on one hand, we do want to believe that everybody that reaches out for help is a legitimate claimant. We actually have claimants who have called into the call center, fraudulent claimants, to ask for help that later have been determined to be fraudsters. So it depends. I would say with this new process we've put into place where we're looking at what is the greatest incident of holds that subsequently determined to be legitimate claims. We are working through those to release those en masse. And again, I hope we have more to share with you via press release on that in the coming weeks. And so some of the folks that have been calling you, they've been caught up in these holds, some of them for weeks, will begin to see a release on their claims and those benefits. Before we get on to non-fraud questions, let's just stick with fraud for a second. Any other questions? I want to acknowledge on behalf of the department, we understand the frustration that folks have been feeling. And again, it's not a perfect solution, and it's certainly an imperfect program. And in partnership with our vendor, have been doing the best that we can to both flag the fraud and prevent the payments while understanding there are some legitimate reasons that some of these claims might be held up. I'm going to move on, and you guys can certainly feel free to continue to chat in your questions. What if the hold remains after the end of PUA? We had a conversation at a national level about this the other day, and I'm going to look to my experts because I don't know that we have any guidance from the feds on this yet. And you can feel free to unmute and add in, or just confirm to me we don't have any official guidance yet. We could maybe refer back to our EUC days during the Great Recession. I'm not sure how we handled those claims. Phil, do you have anything, insight to share?
Yeah, well, I was going to say, I don't believe we've had any additional guidance from the federal government. Generally, what would happen is if we remove a hold later, afterwards, and PUA is over, there would be back weeks. We would go back and we would look to make those individuals whole. We almost always try to make sure we're making people whole if we had to hold items up. So we would do our best to accomplish that.
And again, we are on a national call with all state labor departments yesterday, and this, in fact, was a topic that came up. And the only reference point that we have by federal guidance is when we were in the Great Recession, and there was multiple tiers of extended benefits. So we'll certainly be looking for additional federal guidance. Other questions? Okay, we will quickly move on to SEB, otherwise known as State Extended Benefits. And this is one where I may ask Ryan to step in. As with PEUC, Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, PUA, SEB is equally as complicated to explain. The gist of it is currently with the extended benefits, regular unemployment, and the state extended benefit program, Coloradans could be eligible for up to 52 weeks of benefits, which is normally 26 weeks. What the state extended benefit program does, it's a marriage of a federal and state program in state statute, allows states when they have a high unemployment rate to add an additional 13 weeks of unemployment benefits for claimants based on its insured unemployment rate, which I will let Ryan explain. Essentially, you trigger onto this program. Unfortunately, you also trigger off when your state rate reaches a certain level. And so data for the week ending 11/14 triggered us off of this program. So what this means for thousands of Coloradans who were previously receiving an extra 13 weeks of benefits is that this program will end. And it ends actually the week ending 11/28. And unfortunately, again, in law, we are not allowed to trigger back on to SEB for an additional 13 weeks. So when you look at the convergence of SEB triggering off and the end of the CARES Act benefits, PEUC and PUA, this certainly will create an issue for Coloradans who've come to rely on these benefits. We will be communicating with these folks who will be impacted by the triggering off of the SEB, just like we will be communicating to all claimants who are ending the end of their benefit timeframe. And I'm going to stop. Ryan, he added something to the chat. Do you have a quick soundbite on the IUR and why folks will see this is not the unemployment rate you'll be addressing today?
Yeah, so in Colorado, the state extended benefits are triggered on and off, determined by the insured unemployment rate, or IUR. We talked about the IUR back in April and March, but I'd like to just kind of reiterate that. This is based on a 13-week average of regular UI continued claims, and then we take that and divide it by our estimated number of covered employment. So I won't share here, but go ahead and just click on that link if you're interested. You'll see the IUR for the past for 2020. The IUR for the week ending November 7th, it drops to 4.9%. That insured unemployment rate dropping below 5% triggers the off mechanism for state extended benefits. We've been in contact with Department of Labor, U.S. Department of Labor about this, and the last payable day share, I believe, is the 28th for state extended benefits. So we triggered on with when the IUR went above 5%, and we triggered off when it went below 5%. I'm happy to answer any other questions, but that's a very basic approach of how SEB is triggered on and off.
Thanks, Ryan. We can answer questions about that as well when we get to your update. The thing I neglected to mention, which will actually segue to the next part of the update, is under the CARES Act allows for 100% reimbursement of SEB benefits. Normally, it's a 50-50 split with the states. That is just one of the mechanisms within the CARES Act that has spoken to the economic downturn and the need for relief, and that is set to expire, that 100% reimbursement for most employers at the end of the year. So speaking of looming CARES Act expiration, the CARES Act does expire at the end of December. The last payable week is December 26th. This includes the SEB reimbursement, PEUC, PUA, reimbursement of work share benefits for employers, and certainly it will be felt by Coloradans as we move toward the pending expiration date of the CARES Act. We know likely as much as you do about the future stimulus package that might be presented and what that might mean to Colorado as we get more guidance and it's official. We certainly, as we have previously, worked to quickly reprogram and adjust our systems to meet the programming requirements. And we'll just keep you posted as we move along. I saw a quick question about SEB. I thought I had this somewhere, but if one of my colleagues has it faster than me. 14,000? Does that ring a bell, Angela or Ryan?
Yeah, Wayne, I think we estimate it's around 14 to 15,000. We pulled some quick numbers last night in anticipation of this, but that's our current estimate. It's about that many claimants currently on SEB that have not yet expired their SEB benefits.
The other thing I failed to mention within the CARES Act is the interest-free borrowing for states' unemployment insurance trust funds. That is also within the CARES Act, so will be expiring by the end of the year. And lastly, just a quick update on how we're just looking more globally at improvements we can be making to the UI program. Since the pandemic started, we've been able to use some additional federal funding, admin and technology support funding to help us meet the demand. We stood up a third-party call center to deal with PUA claims. We hired a vendor to help us with adjudication fact-finding, and we continue to look for ways to leverage that funding in other areas within the program. Right now, we are in the final stages of vendor solicitation in 2 areas. One, reviewing process improvements we can be making on the customer service side of the program. And then the second one, how we can improve our claimant communication, claimant interface, and external communications with UI claimants. And so again, we hope to have those vendors on board before the end of the year and look forward to reporting on what they have discovered and how we've implemented their solutions on how we can improve the performance of the program. Okay, I wonder if we should, let's stop with WorkShare, benefits of WorkShare, how they relate to restaurants. It's a great question. So WorkShare, and again, I would look to my colleagues if I miss anything. I have one of our senior managers over the program here too, but WorkShare is a program during I think the height of its participation during the pandemic, we had over 1,100 employers participating, and we're down to just under 900, and we certainly expect to see that increase with the recent announcements of closures related to the pandemic. It's an opportunity for an employer to avoid a full workforce reduction and essentially spread the reduction across the workforce, reducing their hours, but keeping their workforce intact. As I mentioned, within the CARES Act, these benefits, which previously, and this is where my colleague might need to keep me honest, were shared between the state and the employer, were now covered by the feds. And I might just ask for Admira to just help me with if there's anything I missed about details within WorkShare.
No, that's accurate, Chair. Through December 31st of this year, based on UPL guidance, it would be a full reimbursement by the feds.
So I would say the short answer is if an employer is looking at a reduction in workforce, absolutely, we would encourage them to explore WorkShare as an option. It's a benefit not just to the worker, but to the employer. We are sending out today, as a matter of fact, an email to about 80,000 employers that we have emails for promoting WorkShare as an alternative to a layoff situation. And staff is ready to receive those plans, review them, and see how we can help our employers facing some downsizing right now. And did I miss anything, WorkShare? And then Ryan, if not, do you want to go back up to the top before your update? Up to you.
Is there a question I missed?
There were a few at the beginning. Why don't we go ahead and go through your presentation, Ryan, and then we can go back to the beginning with questions.
That sounds good. All right. Yes. Thank you. So we're going to break this up a bit. First, I'm going to go over unemployment insurance, kind of akin to what we would do on our weekly updates. Then I'll pause for questions regarding that. And then, sure, maybe we'll play by ear, and then I can move into the employment situation update. So you'll hear me talk a bunch. But as always, I throw a ton of data at you all, but we'll send out my talking points and the data attached to that. So don't worry about having to write or record too fast. Let's start off with the most recent initial claims data. The most recent data available is for the week ending November 14th. The department processed 9,171 regular UI initial claims for the week of the 14th. As expected, claims have increased over the past several weeks. A little over 6,000 regular UI claims were registered for the week ending October 24th. There are a number of factors driving that trend upward, and I'll go over those in some detail. First, as I have mentioned in previous calls, regular UI claims historically increase in the fourth quarter. This is due to the seasonality and change in the weather. This is particularly evident in an industry like construction. On average, the total number of initial claims filed in the fourth quarter is about 34% higher when compared to the third quarter total. Second, because of COVID-19, restaurants have been significantly impacted this year from a UI claims perspective. Restaurants represented nearly 20% of all claims with identifiable industries during the shutdown and closure orders earlier in the year. And despite warmer weather, and outdoor seating, takeout, and delivery options, approximately 10% of regular initial claims filed between May and September originated from the restaurant industry. And while we only have industry-level claims data through the week ending October 31st, restaurants' share of regular initial claims has ticked up to nearly 13%, and that's its highest share since April. It is expected that the total number of weekly initial claims in the restaurant industry, as well as its overall share, will continue to increase in November and December. This will primarily be driven by colder weather, reduced capacity, and a potential decrease in consumer demand if COVID-19 cases continue to accelerate. My final point, I would like to also make clear that regular UI initial claims data we provide every week captures new claims as well as claims that are reopened after an individual gained employment and was then subsequently laid off after a period of time. So in 2019, about 85% of weekly regular UI initial claims were new claims. During March and April of this year, that share increased to over 95%. That's due to the massive influx of new claimants. However, throughout the remainder of the year, the new claim share has steadily fallen and sits at around 65% as of the past few weeks. That relatively lower rate is being primarily driven by higher occurrence of reopened claims, as more individuals are experiencing layoffs after a period of employment. So also keep that in mind when looking at the weekly claims volumes. As we noted in yesterday's press release, we continue to analyze potential fraud with the PUA program, and therefore claims activity for the week ending November 14th are currently unavailable. As a reminder from conversations we've had in prior calls, with the reported PUA numbers, these are specifically those that we submit to the Employment and Training Administration every week, and that we also provide in the press release. We are attempting to best capture actual economic activity and demand for PUA benefits. Therefore, in the instances where we suspect fraudulent activity, that fraudulent activity may be influencing our reported figures, we're going to step back, evaluate, and then try to provide accurate estimates. That said, PUA initial claims for the week ending November 7th have been revised down to 6,121 from 7,281 previously reported. Figures for that week may be further revised dependent on additional analysis that Sharon and I have talked about in this call. Shifting to continued claims, regular UI continued claims have dropped below 90,000 for the week ending November 7th. That's the lowest level since the week of March 28th, when regular continued claims were around 73,000. However, the Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, or PEUC program, registered around 60,000 continued claims for the week of the 7th, as more individuals shift to PEUC due to exhausting their regular UI benefits. So this is also important to keep in mind when we talk about transition from programs. Regular UI offers 26 weeks of maximum benefits. Then the CARES Act enabled PEUC, so individuals will shift from regular UI to PEUC that offers another 13 weeks. After PEUC expires, you then shift to SEB. And then Phil or someone in UI could help me too. Then I believe from SEB, you can also be eligible for PUA benefits or the PUA program. So
yeah,
back me up on that.
I can jump in there for you a little bit, Ryan. Yeah, a regular state unemployment claim. Once you exhaust that, you would file or go on to the PEUC, Pandemic Emergency Unemployment Compensation, which, as Ryan mentioned, provides the 13 additional weeks. Of course, that program ends here, last payable week, the December 26th, 2020, as with all other CARES Act programs at this point in time. Then after that, an individual who exhausts PEUC on the state side may be eligible for state extended benefits. And that's an amount that is either pays at 50% of what the maximum benefit was on their claim, or 13 weeks, whichever was less. Then if a party were to exhaust all that, and the reason they're unemployed fits one of the self-certification roles within the PUA program, they may be eligible to file for PUA again before December 26th, with that again being the last payable week. The difference on the PUA program is the PUA program provides 39 weeks of benefits for individuals in the program. Somebody coming over from the state program who has exhausted state benefits, exhausted PEUC, and exhausted SEB will have their total weeks available reduced on the PUA program, and it will be reduced by the total number of weeks for which they received regular state benefits, and for which they also received total number of weeks of SEB payments. It is not reduced for any weeks that they receive for PEUC. It is possible that there would be some individuals who received 26 weeks of regular state benefits and qualified and received 13 weeks of SEB. They wouldn't qualify for anything over in PUA because they would have already received 39 weeks. I hope that helps you out, Ryan.
It did. Thank you very much, Phil. And I hope it helped everyone else out too. Just to back up a bit, when we talk about, 15 states moving the red dial, heightened cases of COVID-19, again, our industry and county level data that we make available on LMI Gateway is lagged by a few weeks. The most recent data is for the week ending October 31st. So we're probably not going to see those immediate impacts for 3 to 4 weeks. Just kind of a heads up. Also, I want to mention that data that we would have released on Tuesday, December 1st, that's going to be delayed due to Thanksgiving holiday and furloughs. Expect that to come out later in the week, just as a heads up for y'all. That will be for the week ending November 14th. So transitioning here to benefits, when looking at all programs, total weekly benefit payments have averaged a little under $90 million per week over the last 6 weeks. For last week, about $32 million was paid in regular UI benefits. PUA benefits totaled $29 million, while PEUC and state extended benefits combined for nearly $23 million. PEUC was about $19 million of that $23 million total. The department has distributed over $6.3 billion in unemployment benefits so far in 2020. About $2.4 billion of that amount stems from regular UI, while the remainder has been paid with federal dollars through programs like PUA, PEUC, federal pandemic unemployment compensation. Again, that was a $600 per week. And the lost wages assistance, that was a $300 a week that we had earlier this year, a few months ago. Finally, an update on the borrowing status of the UI Trust Fund. About $573 million has been borrowed from the Federal Unemployment Account, or FUA, as of yesterday. 19 other states and the Virgin Islands are also borrowing from FUA, and that is unchanged from what I reported last month. And approximately $41.5 billion has been borrowed in total so far for all states combined. So for that, I will pause my UI section and see if we have any questions, or Cher has any comments she needs to make. No?
Ryan, did you touch on the surge in PUA claims that are being seen in other states? Sorry if I missed that update as well.
Sure. I believe we mentioned this in yesterday's press release, but fraud has really been rampant through most states. Almost every state has had an issue with fraud in the PUA program. And you could see that in some of the oddities in the data that's reported on a weekly basis from Department of Labor. Louisiana what they're reporting. Again, every state might have a different methodology in terms of what they're reporting every week. But Louisiana claims jumped from 9,600 to 39,000 on a week-to-week basis. You have states like Minnesota and Idaho who are reporting single-digit PUA numbers. We also had California a few months ago, who I believe had to completely freeze everything for about three weeks. And we would see jumps of hundreds of thousands in PUA claims from California. So just important to keep in mind that every state is dealing with this. And again, from a reporting standpoint, we're just trying to best reflect that economic activity. Thanks, Cher.
Sure.
All right, I'm not seeing any questions, so I think we had a question about exhaustees. I don't, Phil, maybe you have an idea about this, but is there any data about expected exhaustion of benefits? That's not something I think we have custom ready. Real time.
I wouldn't have it custom ready. Probably go back and look. So if we think back to a fair number of individuals, and again, some of this is anecdotal, who filed claims, really a lot of them that were effective March 15th of 2020 will be getting close here to where they've run through all their state benefits, they've run through PEUC, and some of them are on SEB, and they may actually receive the full amount of SEB on there. So we are hitting towards that end of really close to 39 weeks sitting there for some of those individuals. So you'd have to go back and try to find some data on what number we had of claims that were effective March 15th, March 22nd, and where most of those are still sitting. But again, it's nothing that I have readily available.
I can't remember who asked that, but we can try and follow up. I think we just need to work through the data. Phil, can you take Tamara's question? I think we answered it somewhat previously that we are conducting outreach to these folks. Or Angela, if she's still on.
Yeah, I would say first and foremost, we're required to be informing these individuals that SEB is ending. That's also part of having this today. So the last effective date that anyone could have on an SEB claim is actually 11/22, where the most they would receive is a week. And then I believe with the PUA program, we're required to inform individuals if they might be eligible for PUA. So along with Angela, I'm sure we are working on additional communication to get out to that group of folks.
And I think we're starting that next week, but Angela, keep me honest there.
That's correct. Next week, we'll start the communications.
Next one's for you, Ryan.
Mark, yeah, you're asking, do you know on a state level, claimants, how many have been fully laid off or have no income versus how many are on some level of reduced hours? Unfortunately, that's not something that I have access to. We may be able to look into it, but again, I think it's going to be on more of the that might be more of a programming ask that we may not have capacity for right now, but offhand I don't have that answer, unfortunately.
And Cher, I see I need to answer something else on Tamara's question. I left part of it alone and didn't catch it, which indicated how much would PUA pay compared to regular UI. So state rules apply on calculating what the weekly benefit amount is on that program. However, on a state claim, a regular state claim, statutorily, the minimum weekly benefit amount is set at $25. The federal government uses a different rule to determine what the minimum weekly payment can be or weekly benefit amount can be on PUA. So for claims filed, I believe anything that's filed after July, it's $227 a week. Claims that were filed prior to that, it's $223 a week minimum. So it pays at a higher minimum. Difference, Tamara, is that regular state unemployment benefits are calculated off of gross wages reported. And the PUA wages utilize net income, essentially. That's a loaded term, net income, but it's a different calculation to arrive at that. The maximum on PUA is the same as the maximum for our regular state benefits here.
I love having the subject matter expert in the house. Thank you, Phil. I wasn't sure, Greg, what your metric question was referring to. Maybe you could expand on that. In the meantime,
I think he's asking about the exhaustion.
Oh, okay.
Greg asked exhaustion questions, so
I think we got to that, right? Or we need to follow up with that. So we'll make a note of that, Greg. I did get an updated number of SEB exhaustees. It's actually over 16,000. Wayne versus 14,000. So that just came in while we were talking. And then I did forget one item to update on, which is to the previous question about the restaurant industry that we're soon going to see likely a lot of workforce reduction due to closures. Today, and in fact, perhaps it's already live, we've actually stood up a brand new web page on our website that is very detailed in walking a claimant through how to actually reopen their claim and what portal to go to and how the questions will present themselves. We were seeing some claimant confusion on some of the eligibility questions regarding separating from a previous employer. So being informed with that user experience, we actually went into greater detail on our website. We are also creating a fact sheet that we'll be sending out to every employer we have in our database that's within the leisure and hospitality industry that they'll be able to share with their workers. Wait for a few questions. Quick update. We do have a QCEW release on Tuesday. Ryan, I do listen to your updates, but did you already address that in the call?
No, we haven't even got to LMI stuff yet. So I'll mention that, Cher. Maybe with that, I could get into the employment situation.
Okay, let's do that.
I think we're going to hit a record here for longest call.
That's all right. Talk fast.
All right, so let's move on to the employment situation. This is for October. As always, the data I will discuss today are based in part on estimates from 2 surveys. Statistics like the unemployment rate, labor force, total employment, and the number of unemployed are derived from a survey of households, otherwise known as the current population survey. Simply put, the household survey is meant to capture the employment and labor force status of individuals within Colorado during a given period. The household survey also includes the self-employed, independent contractors, farm workers, and those not attached to a traditional payroll employer. However, we are unable to break those out at a state level. Non-farm payroll job estimates come from a survey of business establishments and government agencies and are intended to measure the number of jobs, not the number of people employed. These estimates exclude employees in agriculture, private households, and the self-employed. As we noted in today's press release for the employment situation, the reference period for the establishment and household surveys was the pay period or week that contains the 12th of the month. Therefore, these data provide a snapshot of Colorado's employment situation during continued stages of the governor's Safer at Home order, which resulted in a return to work for more Coloradans. Revisions to October data, along with preliminary estimates for November, will be released Friday, December 18th. Expected revisions to non-farm payroll jobs estimates for second quarter 2020 will be released Tuesday, November 24th. We did release the raw QCW data, quarterly census of employment and wages for second quarter. That is now available on LMI Gateway, and we posted that on Wednesday. For results from the household survey, Colorado's seasonally adjusted unemployment rate was flat in October, unchanged at 6.4%. The lack of change was due to similar over-the-month changes in labor force and total employment, 17,600 and 15,800 respectively. Additionally, October marked the second straight month that Colorado's labor force participation rate and employment to population ratio both increased. While the state's labor force participation rate has fluctuated significantly since February, it has increased by over a percentage point since April, from 66.4% to 67.6% in October. On the other hand, Colorado's employment to population ratio increased for the 6th consecutive month, increasing to 63.3% in October. In October, Colorado was tied with West Virginia for the 30th lowest unemployment rate in the nation. Nebraska had the lowest rate at 3%, and Hawaii had the highest rate at 14.3%. The U.S. seasonally adjusted unemployment rate decreased from 7.9% in September to 6.9% in October. As we mentioned in today's press release, the 5 counties with the highest not seasonally adjusted unemployment rates were San Miguel, Huerfano, Summit, Pueblo, and Pitkin. Among the 7 metropolitan areas in the state, Pueblo had the highest rate at 7.8%. Fort Collins and Boulder had the lowest rates at 5.1 and 5.2% respectively. Grand Junction, Colorado Springs, Greeley, and Denver all had rates between 5.7 and 6.5%. It is recommended to compare all these sub-state rates I mentioned to the statewide not seasonally adjusted unemployment rate, which was 6.2% in October. In October, we estimate little change in the composition of unemployed persons when comparing those on permanent layoff versus temporary. The permanent share remained at about 42%, while the temporary share fell to 37% from 40% in September. The difference is a result of a decent influx of reentrants to the labor force, which also helps to explain the increase in the labor force participation rate in October. However, the concerning trend of longer-term unemployment continued into October. Last month, the median length of unemployment duration increased to a little over 23 weeks compared to 21 weeks in September. As a reminder, the duration data comes from the household survey and reflects duration for all types of unemployment. It is not at all related to duration of individuals receiving unemployment insurance benefits. Additionally, the share of Coloradans unemployed long-term, that's more than 26 weeks, that jumped from 25% in September to over 33% in October. As a reminder, that rate ranged around 40% during the Great Recession, rate share. It is probable that unemployment duration and the long-term unemployed share will continue to increase through the winter. Finally, the share of individuals in Colorado's labor force who are working part-time but would prefer full-time hours declined for the second straight month to a little over 5%. That translates to approximately 170,000 individuals. These types of individuals are categorized as involuntary part-time or underemployed workers. Additionally, in this definition, part-time is defined as anything less than 35 hours. So with that, I'm going to take a quick pause before we shift to the establishment survey and see if we have any questions regarding the house survey. Looks like we do have some. Ryan, with so many counties going into, with so many counties going to red level, what does your crystal ball, I don't have a crystal ball, Charles, say about what might do to this month? Are you talking about November's rate, I assume? Will temporary holiday works keep that in check? So again, it's really crucial when we talk about each month is to, again, reflect on what the reference week is. And again, the reference week is going to be the week of the 12th. So for the week containing the 12th for November is going to be prior to those counties shifting into the red level and subsequent orders for limited or in-dining services. So I'm not sure if we will see necessarily an increase in November due to the reference week. Basically, we're saying, are you employed during this week? If anything, we may see something in December as that may capture then what we're seeing later in November. Ryan, looking at increase initial UI applications and the change in the unemployment rate, it seems Colorado's economy has lost some steam. Can you discuss why we're starting to lag on those measures? Again, like I mentioned, there's a number of reasons why we are seeing increase in the initial UI applications. We do continue to see increase employment to population ratio, which is, I think, positive as more individuals are becoming employed than, say, in April. We're as I mentioned in just a bit, we're also seeing positive gains with payroll jobs. But again, I really do believe recovery is dependent on getting COVID-19 under control, and a lot of that's going to be predicated on a vaccine and the ability for people to maybe return to some sort of normalcy. So I do think that's that's to be expected as we get through this pandemic. Is again, as always, through this entire 9 months now, the pandemic will dictate recovery. Looks, Wayne, given that initial claims are increasing, do you expect the November rate? Yeah, Wayne, I think I touched on that too in terms of what we might expect for November. Haley, I will maybe loop back on your industry question as I get to the establishment survey. So with that, let me shift to results from the establishment survey. Preliminary estimates show that on a seasonally adjusted basis, Colorado added 21,100 non-farm payroll jobs from September to October. Additionally, September payroll jobs were revised up slightly. The job growth numbers from September and October mean the state has now regained 217,000 of the 342,300 non-farm payroll jobs lost in March and April. The job gains of 217,000 over the past month represent a recovery of over 63% of those lost jobs earlier in the year. A similar analysis of the change in U.S. non-farm payroll jobs since April revealed the U.S. added back around 54% of lost jobs. So in terms of our non-farm payroll recovery analysis, Colorado is outpacing the U.S. in terms of recovery. While government employment dropped by 900 in October, those losses are primarily due to the end of the 2020 census campaign and related temporary jobs. The private sector experienced yet another month of strong gains, adding 22,000 payroll jobs in September, and that marks the sixth consecutive month with gains of at least 20,000. There were 6 private industry supersectors that added at least 1,000 payroll jobs last month. Like in September, trade, transportation, and utilities, and leisure and hospitality were the largest drivers of private sector job growth in October. They accounted for about 61% of those 22,000 jobs added. Digging deeper into the super sectors reveals that on a seasonally adjusted basis, retail added 4,500 jobs, while accommodation and food services grew by 4,400. Particularly with accommodation food services, as we shift again towards more limitations, the red dial for restaurants, I do that most certainly going to be a headwind for accommodation food services sector and possibly for job growth for the state overall. Possibly November, but I do see that definitely being a factor in December. Over the past 6 months, private businesses have added 242,100 jobs, and that's compared to losses totaling 332,200 in March and April. That represents a recovery of about 73% of private sector jobs lost earlier in the year, and that substantially outpaces the U.S. rate of around 58%. Finally, I will cover jobs added by metro area. Again, we do not break out non-farm payroll job estimates by county. I'll just go down from the metro area that added the most jobs to those that lost jobs. Denver added 8,800 payroll jobs over the month. Fort Collins added 1,800. Boulder and Grand Junction, payroll jobs grew by 400. Pueblo had a small increase of 200. And Greeley and Colorado Springs both lost jobs. Greeley shed 500 jobs over the month, while Colorado Springs lost 600 jobs. I've not done any kind of industry analysis yet on those areas. I've just been really focusing on the state as a whole. So looping back to Haley's question, what trends have we seen in construction, healthcare, and social assistance jobs? Let me just pull something up real quick that I can reference. So one thing we've been doing, we've been talking about the recovery rate for, total non-farm and private sector. So another thing we could also do is do that at the sector level. And so when we look at private healthcare and social assistance, that industry shed a little over 41,000 jobs from February to April. And from April to October has now regained 28,900 payroll jobs. And that's a recovery rate of about 70%. When we look at construction, that recovery rate's going to be a little lower. Construction did see some positive gains in October, but did experience losses in September. So construction job growth has been relatively slow since about May or June. Construction shed 13,700 jobs from February to April and has regained back 7,600 jobs from April to October. And that's a recovery rate of about 55%. So that does, significantly lag that recovery rate for all private sector industry in Colorado. Are there any questions I might have missed? I think I've touched on a lot of them, but happy to address anything.
I think you're caught up.
Great. Oh, I guess, Haley did ask, have the number of claims in these industries changed in a surprising way throughout the pandemic? So Haley, really construction typically will have our highest number of claims. Again, it's just based on the type of work and the seasonal effects from construction. Construction during the pandemic has really been a very low share of overall claims, as we've seen extremely high level claims in industries like trade, transportation, utilities, and leisure and hospitality, other services. Construction hasn't really surprised me, and now we are starting to see construction. On the press release, construction had the second most initial claims for the week ending October 31st. And so that's more in line with what we would expect in the fourth quarter. When we look at something like healthcare and social assistance, what we really saw was a massive uptick in claims in healthcare and social assistance during the shutdown orders. And that was due to basically emphasis that any kind of non-critical procedure should be delayed. So we saw massive spikes in places like dentist offices, chiropractic offices. Those claims levels have more or less returned. They're still elevated, but have more or less returned to normal. But the composition of claims activity within healthcare and social assistance is certainly different than most industries due to those delays in procedures. All right, and now I think we're caught up, so I will send it back to Cher.
Thank you, Ryan. Very useful information. That was probably deepest briefing to date. Wait till we get to December's in January. Okay, I think then, Ryan, the QCEW release is scheduled for Tuesday. These are quarterly revisions based on newer wage data that the division receives. And so look for that press release Tuesday at 8 a.m. Happy to have any questions associated with that, but we don't have a scheduled press call for QCEW releases. And then the November employment situation will be released on December 18th. Ryan, is that a Friday? I think it is a Friday.
That's a Friday.
And so we obviously will have a press call associated with that release at 10 a.m. And then we may have another press call here or there between now and the November update in December, just based on what we see with exhaustees and a variety of other impacts to the program in the next several weeks. With that, I think we touched on everything almost right to an hour. So we certainly appreciate your attention and involvement and questions. And certainly let me know if you have any follow-ups, can put you in touch with Ryan or can help answer those myself. And everybody, good to see you. We'll see you soon and stay safe. Thank you. Bye-bye.